Why don't we call the meeting to order? And the first, would just like to introduce the attendees. I'm Jim Broderick, Chair this year of the Town Council's Financial Oversight Committee. This is our meeting of April 29th at 1:30. Members, Chris Saulnier and Kathleen Hill, Tom O'Connor, Mike Kane ex officio, Mary McNally and Steve Lonergan ex officio, and attending as our resources, and the department heads Ryan Quimby and Bruce Finney, so that we can discuss their budgets. So our first order, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us. Just wanted to say that if anybody is recording the meeting other than LCAT, please notify us now. Hearing nobody, we'll assume that's a no. And finally, in terms of introductions, I just want to state that this meeting is being held via Zoom in accordance with the governor's orders of March 16th, 2020. With that being said, next order of business is to review and approve the minutes of our 4/22 meeting. And thank you, Chris, for taking them. I don't know if everyone had a chance to review. If there's any changes or corrections you would like to make, please say so now. And if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Kathy, and is there a second?
Second.
I would think you would approve them, Chris.
I hope so. Well,
Okay.
Tom wasn't there, so I knew he wasn't going to second.
Okay.
No,
So any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, it's a roll call vote. Chris?
Yes.
Tom, are you abstaining?
abstaining.
Okay. Kathy?
Abstaining.
Abstaining. Jim? Yes. Rich is not here to vote. So what does that mean? Does that mean we defer? Is that enough of us to do this, or do we wait until next week?
I think you need to defer it.
You probably do have to defer it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We'll just put it on next week's agenda. So the first order of business is really just a follow over from last week's meeting that we had that was devoted to the capital plan. And I'm glad that everything was resolved to everyone's satisfaction and that Mary didn't have to run through hoops to correct matters. And it was just a matter of looking at the right spreadsheet and an expanded spreadsheet. So Ryan was kind enough to send to all of us the expanded spreadsheet, and we did kind of consciously order our meetings here so that members of the committee could look over the capital plan requests and kind of serendipitously have Bruce and Ryan here with us to review their budgets, at the same time available to ask any follow-up questions regarding their portions of the capital plan, or in Ryan's case, he really chaired Mary's advisory committee. So I would say any questions that one would like to, well, we've all seen the expanded and clarified spreadsheet. Questions, issues as a result of looking through that? Yes, Chris.
I wanted to know, this is on the modular classroom. I wanted to know, is it being built in place or is it being built elsewhere and brought in?
Yes, that's actually going to be a conventionally framed building, so it's not going to be modular construction. So the title of the project really doesn't go along with the project, but it is going to be stick framed on site.
Okay. And a follow-up question, Jim?
Yes.
You mentioned demolition, and I kind of went through the breakdown of costs that you gave us, but I wasn't clear on the cost of demolition.
Okay, let me get to that. So, what I have here for the breakdown on the demolition, so square footage based on that. So the $315 per square foot includes abatement, demolition, and limited site work. That's part of the square footage cost as well.
Okay. Have you received estimates in order to work up this number, Bruce?
No, this actually came from the engineering firm that designed Meadowbrook. So based on last year's project, like I said, when we were putting this forward, I asked for their recommendations on the cost for the project. So that's how I got this number.
Okay, thank you.
I have a follow-up question too, Jim.
Yes.
Bruce, it's fair to say that should this pass, the actual work won't occur till the summer of 22?
That's correct. And obviously it depends on bonding and everything else. And because of the project, we have to go through that designer selection process as well. So typically it's like 2 years in order to get a project like this going.
And once the shovel is in the ground, so to speak,
Yep.
what's the duration before kids could actually be in there?
So last year we were kind of, it was kind of beneficial, and unfortunately during the pandemic, we were able to do the work early. So it was actually probably about 6 months. That's
Okay.
that's how long Meadowbrook took. So I gotta say, because of the reduced scope of this project, maybe 4 months.
Mhm.
Okay.
So there'll be at some point, the summer months are 2 months for, July and August.
Exactly.
So it's fair to say that there'll be a couple of months where they'll have to double the kids up somehow.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yes, Tom.
Bruce, a question regarding the overall cost. I heard what you said about Ty and Bond. That's an engineering firm.
Yes,
who
it is.
works with a lot of different construction companies.
Yes.
And this is their best guess at what the cost is going to be.
Yes. Yes.
That's where my question lies. I don't like best guesses. I would have preferred to see estimates. Is it possible to get estimates from construction companies that are actually going to do the build?
Oh, this is based on obviously what we did last year, but obviously going out to bid and getting actual estimates from contractors is a totally different, you know what I mean, different portion of the project. So this is the engineering firm that does the estimates for the construction, demolition, everything regarding the project.
Yes, Mike.
I would just add that, that's pretty normal for engineering companies to produce a price at that point in time based on industry standards for the cost of material and such and estimated labor. But operating under COVID right now, today, even if you were to get an estimate today, that number could be entirely different a year from now. I would hope that the number would get better. I can only say at this point in time right now, a sheet of plywood 1 year ago is 3 times more money today. And I would hope, because of the supply and demand process, that construction or lumber purchases obviously are going to slide down. People aren't going to be paying or be able to even afford to spec a house or a building because lumber, I'll just make a quick example, $18 for a sheet of plywood a year ago, you're looking at about $51 a sheet right now. So back to supply and demand, as the supply starts increasing, you'll probably be in much better shape and certainly have better numbers to work with a year from now, once that supply increases and these prices become much more realistic.
Sure. And to follow up, and I don't mean to cut you off, Mike, through the chair, obviously to answer Tom's question as well, a contractor would kind of be hard to give me any kind of estimate based on, they don't have any drawings to go by or anything else. So it'd be difficult. So that's why I typically reach out to the engineering firm, like I said, and is familiar with what we're going to be looking for in this project as well.
Yeah. A follow-up question, Jim?
Yes, Tom.
These discussions, that's where my concern comes in. As Mike stated, I'm aware that construction costs are way up because of COVID. Lumber costs are way up. This is a one-year quote or an estimate from a year ago, when it may or may not have taken into consideration the cost of COVID. So I'm still not firm on that number. I mean, that 950, is it COVID related or is it un-COVID related? So how can we rely on that number?
So Mike, I mean, Tom, my take is that, and just thinking about it, is that what we're putting forth as an estimate of the cost of the project. As Bruce goes forward, assuming it would be approved, you're going to wind up vetting out these through actual designs and then construction contractor estimates in terms of what they would do. If it turned out to be more, I mean, obviously, if it's less than the 950, yeah, you just wouldn't spend as much. If it's more than the 950, I assume at that point you'd have to come back from
Yes.
for additional funding to make that project work, correct?
Sure.
Yes, Tom.
Yes, Bruce, or actually Jim, it actually doesn't work that way. What happens is this is a recommended budget to the council, and the council will vote on that amount for the project and that amount only. And my assumption is if it passes, it's to not exceed that amount. So that number's firm. It's not a what if kind of scenario.
No.
If it's less or more, that number is firm. So I'm not comfortable voting on a number that's going to move up or down, subjectively.
I guess what I meant to say, Tom, is that I think we run the risk of sometimes always being, you could run the risk of having the actual, when you actually do the true out and get the actual costs involved, as you get closer to actually starting the project, you might find that the estimate wasn't sufficient. And if that were the case, you're absolutely right. The town council approves 950. If they need $1 million, a vote would have to go back to the town council to determine whether they would approve an additional amount. Is it what I was thinking the process would be?
Yeah, that's how we've done it in the past with capital projects, where they fall short. And if the funding is too great, then when the project's complete, that money gets turned back to other projects of like terms, like projects with like terms.
Yeah.
So, yes, Tim.
Bruce, I mean, again, just when you look at that number, these are 2 modular classrooms that are being taken down. And that's the first I've heard of an abatement that may be needed. So obviously there's something in there that needs to be removed under quarantined kind of a scenario. And that's going to add cost to the project. Do they know how much of that is in there? Have they included that to say that I don't want them tearing up a floor saying, geez, the tiles are loaded with asbestos and it's going to cost another $250,000 more. I'd like to see the project go forward, but I'd like to see it go forward with the correct amount.
Okay, obviously, when it comes to the square footage, they're just obviously putting in a number, a just in case number, if there is any kind of abatement. I don't foresee any kind of abatement for the project based on the year these were installed. Like I said, there's allowances set forth in every project as just placeholders. Because like you said, when it comes to construction and removing and demolition of materials, these things just sometimes pop up without obviously knowing they're there.
Yes, and that's what I mean. Did Ty and Bond actually go out and look at the structures?
No, they did not, no.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Chris.
I'd just like to add that I think this is more or less of an authorization vote on the part of the council. And actually, as Mary told us, the debt service isn't going to hit the budget until fiscal '23. I understand Tom's concerns, but I think that will become clearer as time goes on and Bruce can enter into the process.
I would agree with you, Chris. Other questions on the list that we had a chance to review? Chris, you had raised a question. Oh, sorry, Tom, I'll come back. You had raised a question on the sidewalk strategy. And would you want to just touch bases what your thinking was there?
Yeah, I guess the estimate on, I saw the estimate for the cost over 20 years on that project. If we borrowed 1.2 million and we were paying back $100,000 a year over 20 years, we're going to be paying $2 million for those sidewalks instead of 1.2 million. And the project would have to be done within a two-year period from what Bruce told us.
That estimate's for 15 years.
Pardon?
That was for 15 years, not 20.
Well, okay, well, even for 15, you'd be talking 1.5 million, which is going to cost us $300,000 in debt service. I would rather see the town make a commitment to the sidewalks and pledge 75,000 a year or 100,000 a year, whichever number seemed feasible, than to incur the interest on that project. I can't see where paying interest on sidewalks is going to serve us very well.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, the interest that we pay is over and above the cost of the sidewalks itself, which is something I don't recall us really talking much through at the advisory committee, and I voted for it. But it is something to consider, since that money could go directly to sidewalks as opposed to, and I as one comment I did have at our meetings then was that we do lose our flexibility to adjust that funding for sidewalks year to year, because it'll be a required payment, going forward. So it's an offset and a question of judgment, weighing the value of getting a bunch of sidewalks in 2 years and the value that the residents might receive from that versus the additional cost of the interest for doing that, as well as the lack of flexibility and the idea that once we do that, we're basically shut out for any other. If we miss some sidewalks that maybe we should have gotten at, we'd have to fund those, separately. But I wanted to make sure you got your point through on this.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
I think it was a good one. Other questions on oh yes, I'm sorry, Tom. Yep.
Yeah, well, my question has to do with one of the other items that is listed in here, and that is the maple shade exterior doors.
Oh, that was
And
explained.
the question is, we've been working on this project for several years, and I went back through the information that I have and found that in a previous project, it said phase 2 of 2 phases, and the project was completed. We're now into another year, and there's an additional 31,800 being requested. And my question is why? What's going on?
I mean, this is, well, it's more of a question for the school department, but things change for security reasons over at some of our schools, and things change on a yearly basis. So as obviously we're doing these door projects, we didn't obviously go through the whole entire school and do every door, but new security concerns come up on a yearly basis. And this is more specifically the foyer at Maple Shade School, the exterior doors to add obviously the, I believe 4 new door leaves. Let's see, 5 new door leaves, powered openers, bollards, and a swipe card access to the facility. So it's for more of a security access to the facility, just like we have at Meadowbrook School now.
So this wasn't originally contemplated as part of the phases. Is that what you're saying?
No, and that's, like I said, things arise every year, new things happen, classrooms move around, and this is, like you said, one of the principals in the school department's list of things to do. So we just move these projects forward.
If there's no other questions on the spreadsheet and the capital issues, I would propose we move on to, I had on our agenda Mr. Quimby, but between Mr. Quimby and Mr. Finney and Mary, if you want to switch that order, it's perfectly fine with me.
I'm okay yielding my position to Mr. Fenny. I know he's planning on his vacation starts after this, so.
All right, then if that's the case, Mr. Finney, you're on. And this is our chance to ask Bruce about any questions we might have about the DPW budget. So Bruce, I have to say that with the school's budget as an exception, they give us one line, but their budget is pretty complicated. You seem to have more budget lines to fill in than anything I've seen. So.
Yeah, Jim, it takes me about 2 months to prepare my budget.
Yeah. Kudos to you for
Yeah.
trying to do all that.
There's a lot of factors involved. Obviously, working with Steve, getting our previous year's balances, waiting for Springfield Water and Sewer to get obviously the information I need for our water and sewer funds. So it's a pretty cumbersome process, but we get through it every year. I can say that it's a pretty lean budget this year on our general fund liabilities. It's only went up from last year about $2,223.29. So we're running very lean, but we'll still get the job done. So like I said, if you have any specific questions, or I can go through each division and take questions after each division, however you guys want to proceed.
So I don't know if people have, I do have lists of questions. Some of them are mainly informational or just making sure I understand what the changes imply. And so I have a list that I plan to go through and probably go, division by division in the order that the budget package was presented. Others, how would you, any druthers as to how to proceed in that?
That's fine with me.
That sounds good.
Okay. All right. And then if I miss anything, let's just chime in as we're on that budget and we'll go from there. So a lot of these are just making sure I'm clear on them, Bruce. Obviously, as you said, that the total impact on the general fund is pretty reasonable. So first of all, just you have a union that's in contract negotiations this year. Is that correct?
Well, just the TEU, Mary. So the TEU.
Yeah, not the 33, the
Right.
yard workers and the building and so forth are not, but just the admin.
Okay. And there's no money in here for anticipated increases as a result of negotiations, correct?
No.
All right. So moving from there, well, I answered myself on the department head salaries. It took me a while to figure out that it's a whole bunch of ones that are allocations sent out. So longevity, did you have retirements? Is that what occurred?
So yes, so it's kind of complicated as well. So under the building division, that actually went up 19%, 19.2 to be exact, because of some of our building staff obviously have increased years. But under the highway division, it actually went down 41.41%, a decrease because of retired employees. And I'm just speaking under general fund. I mean, I can go into the sewer fund.
No, we'll go as we get there.
Okay.
I'm just to make sure everyone's on the same page as me. I'm on the highway
Okay.
budget for 21.
Okay.
And then this is minor, but so the clothing stipend went up, and it says holsters, boot allowance, and cell phones. Is that like a new thing that you're providing? Is that what it is?
Yes, part of our negotiations this past last summer, actually, there was a new cell phone use that was added to that stipend per year, which is $250. They have a $275 boot allowance, and then a $75 hoisters license allowance as well. To renew their hoisters license, this is for operating all the equipment and machinery.
Okay, so it's something that's kind of a new thing that's been netting in.
Yes.
All right. And then down in non-salary expenses, again, I take it that you didn't need a printer before and now you do?
This is part of the whole, the town-wide printer contract, town-wide. So this is a new line item, and so that's why that's there. And I split it between many different divisions, I believe 3.
So, and then in other service police details, a 54% increase. Is that because you are having more jobs that require police details, or are the cost of the police details going up, or?
Can you tell me which division you're in?
Yes, I'm in highway still, and
Okay,
it's
highway?
5294.
Yes. Yeah, so actually last year we overexpended that account. So that's why I increased it for next year.
All right. And this is not a question on the budget, but I couldn't resist asking, what is Dude Solutions?
Dude Solution is our work order system.
Okay, all right. You have a note under 5460 groundkeeping supplies, fertilization program increase, but there was no increase.
No, there was no increase.
Okay. Was
Sorry.
that a comment from last year or something?
Yes, it probably was from, I think it was because we actually, I believe when, and I forget the counselor's name that was on the council, that remember we switched some line items around and added some salary line items to increase our ground maintenance supply budget.
Okay.
So we shifted some money around, but we ended up putting it back, obviously, the way it was previously.
And then on that same bottom one of the same page, I'm not complaining, it's a 12% decrease in vehicle supply gasoline, but I was just curious, if anything, I would think that gasoline would be going up.
Yeah. So, well, like you said, what helps this as well, so each division, it has a gasoline account, so water, sewer, stormwater, not in building because that's a general fund. So I took last year's numbers and that's why you see that new number there.
Okay. Those were my questions on the highway. Questions from other committee members? Okay, then my next set is in building, Bruce.
Yep.
And again, most of this is just making sure I kind of understand. So I didn't have anything, once I figured out the allocation issue in salaries, it kind of helped me get through that. I was under 5, and I have to say, if anything's going to get me reaching for a magnifying glass, it's these sheets here. It's building maintenance, contracted services, and Birchland Park and high school.
Yep.
And one is a $5,000 increase, and one is a $5,000 decrease. Is it related somehow, or?
No, well, like I said, this year I tried to offset increases and decreases, but we ended up adding more funding at Birchland Park because that facility is 20 years old. We're seeing a lot of building automation components that are starting to fail. So based on that and talking with our facilities manager, we took a little bit out of the high school and put it up into the Birchland Park facility.
Okay. Then there's a professional technical other, which was a 12% increase, $10,000. Is that some kind of consultant or contracted service or?
That actually, under 5307, that actually decreased by $10,000.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. But is that what you use it for consultants or whatever? or-
No, so typically that's for outside contractors, electrical contractors, painters, fire sprinkler system contractors, automation people, fire extinguisher inspections, elevator inspections, all the above and more.
Those were the questions I had on building. Anybody have others to cover? Then I'm on to snow and ice. And so is all the plowing done through overtime? Is that how that works?
Yes, so that when they're on straight time, or obviously they're 7 to 3:30, they get, obviously it just gets taken out of their respective division. So only their overtime is charged as snow and ice.
So the FY20 actual was 66,000. The budget for FY21 is 20, and so it refreshed me because it's been a while since I was appropriations and we were under the former form of government. Is this this is the account that if you overspend, you get a chance to come back to it with the state
Yes.
offsets?
Exactly, yes,
Okay, and that's why you kind of maintain a fairly flat budget?
yes.
Have we had a record of having to dip into that much or fairly frequently? Because it does kind of draw away from, takes away from what our revenue would be for the future year, right?
Sure, and I don't know if Steve has the answer to that, but typically, depending on the year, I do keep track. I have a sheet here. So as of right now, we're about minus 124,554 in that budget. So that's our shortfall for this year.
And is that fairly typical?
It depends. This is one of those items that if you put too much money in and you don't spend it, you know what I mean? Then like you said, you're tying up that money. And I've actually seen it where we've come pretty close. So it's a gamble, I guess you could say.
So I guess in just a technical thing on sources of funds projected for FY22, is that something we have to account for in terms of reducing our revenue by our estimated revenue by 120,000? Chris, do you?
From my understanding of snow and ice, if they overspend, then it's called a snow and ice deficit, and it has to be raised on the recap. So yeah, it would affect it. Right now, Bruce is saying that the account is okay. We have no snow and ice deficit in fiscal 21. So therefore, we don't have to raise any money on the recap. So that would show up as an expense if we had a deficit.
Right. I'm sorry. I thought I heard him say we're 120,000 to the bad.
That's correct. I'm sorry if I didn't say that properly.
Steve?
With the snow and ice, because it's a deficit spending account, Chris is right. We can either raise it up on the recap, or at year end, when we know what the dollar amount is, we can take it out of free cash and make up the difference, which is what we did last year. The thing to remember with this, and the reason we keep it level budget, once you put a budget amount in that, you have to keep it consistent. So if you budget 300,000 every year, it'd have to be 300,000 every year,
Okay.
and then adjust accordingly. This way, by keeping it, and most communities do keep it on the lower end, conservative end, because especially since we've had mild winters recently, and then make it up either through the recap or by getting free cash and transferring it in to make it zero.
Yeah, that's my recollection of the strategy. I think if we thought it might be 120,000, though, I'm thinking maybe it's something we might want to add to our calculations when we project what we have for the FY22 budget. That's all. And,
Okay, sounds reasonable.
all All right, the next, did I have any other questions? So the 127,000 is the other services. So are those contractors that you hire, Bruce, to plow additionally as supplemental drivers and plowers for the town?
Personal technical others on snow and ice.
Yes, it's 5291 snow and ice, yeah. I mean, you don't have any increase. I just, again, as I said, it was more for me to understand a little better.
That line item, I believe, is used for purchasing all our salt and our treatment for our roads. That's what that account line item is used for.
Other services, okay. All right, so that's your salt.
Salt. Yep. And like I said, if I don't have all the information in front of me. If I ran a report from Eunice, I can give you a more in-depth explanation, Jim.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to get an idea of what some of the line items are not very descriptive.
I know.
That was all the questions I had in snow and ice. Anyone had any others? If not, I'll just move on to town and school utilities. Obviously, very, it's good to see and I'm not even sure I can actually tell whether I've got a minus, or I think it's a minus 0.23%.
Yes, you do.
Definitely need the magnifying glasses. But I guess the question there was a couple of decreases projected, Bruce, in personal park gas and high school gas.
Yep.
5 and 10. Is that you're thinking less usage, or are you thinking the rate is going down?
So this is kind of one of those accounts. It's looking into a crystal ball,
Right.
trying to figure out what the town's going to use based on obviously how cold it is, how warm it is. And typically what I do is run a 3-year average for the utilities. So I took the last 3 years number, put them into a spreadsheet, and this is how I figure out the utilities. And I adjust accordingly every year, depending on what we see and how the numbers land.
All right. So you don't necessarily try to take into account current circumstances or forecasts or.
No, well, like we thought, and this is kind of a not really a funny story, but we thought we would see some big savings last year when the schools let out, but we didn't see any. Unfortunately, even though the buildings were closed, they were still occupied, so you couldn't really shut down the systems or isolate systems, unfortunately. So, yeah.
One other question I guess I had was, and again, it's more informational, is item 5213, solar net meter credits.
Yes.
Where it looks like it's listed as an expense, and that the expense went up $20,000. So when clearly I don't understand how it works, because when I think of credit, I think of a minus expense, not an expense.
So this is our portion that we pay Altus out in Hamden for that solar facility. So based on the numbers I received actually in December, we were at that halfway mark. So I increased this by that margin just because, like I said, by year's end, that's where we're going to be.
So does that mean the energy savings is realized in some other account?
It's kind of complicated. And hopefully I can explain it. So we pay, I got to find my utilities account. And I had to do this for my Board of Public Works.
I mean, it's something we can definitely just have as a follow-up, Bruce.
Okay, or I can
I
send.
don't need to have the answer today.
It is. So we pay 20 cents on the dollar or 80 cents on the dollar for our solar credit. And so that portion of that that we're not paying for, we pay Altus for. And I did some preliminary numbers for my board back in February discussing this. So if we didn't have these solar credits, and I'm just going to round up some numbers, we would pay roughly $800,000 in electricity versus $400,000. So we're saving about 50% total on our electricity usage by using this solar facility.
Right.
Okay.
Thank
You
you.
got
That concluded my listing of questions for Bruce. Tom?
I have a question. From the information that I've been reading and the feedback I've been getting from the business communities, that the cost of utilities are increasing and will continue to increase in the near future. So I think we ought to consider additional monies in that account to account for that, because it's not gonna. I'm sorry, what was that?
No, I'm sorry, my radio's
Oh,
going.
okay, so there may be a slight reduction, but I think there's going to be a substantial increase. And I hate to see us get caught short-handed going down the road. I would rather have it included or consider it now, so that it's not an emergency transfer or a free cash transfer.
Right. And it's like I said, I took everything under a microscope this year, obviously to reduce anything and everywhere I can. And like I said previously, it's kind of a gamble every year trying to project your utilities. But I can tell you, we are currently in a contract with Sparks Energy. So we're locked in, Tom, right now in all our utilities. So that gives us a favorable advantage from the outside world. There is some other hidden costs that the utility does tack on once in a while, but our utility accounts are actually pretty stable. It's just the usage which fluctuates a lot.
Right.
I'm pretty confident it is a very lean utility budget. So, I mean, that's my best explanation I can give you. So we are locked in at a certain rate. So on our gas right now, it goes from November 2020 to November 2022. We are locked in at 0.661 611 per therm. In our that supplier or our transmission people are Sparks Energy, and obviously the supplier is Eversource. On our electrical accounts, our contract is good from October 2020 to October 2023. We are paying 0.08795 cents per kilowatt hour. Of our suppliers, National Grid, and our transmission people is EDF Energy. So we have, like you said, we have another year and a half or so. I'm actually right now talking with my energy guy, Paul Schroeder from Pioneer Valley. Pioneer Valley, it's
The collaborative.
Collaborative. So I actually got some new numbers here, Tom, just so you know. So it looks like, and I'm going to obviously get some contracts down to Merit at some point in time. Our actual gas rate is actually going to be going down slightly. So a new rate right now is 0.625. So we're currently at 661. And think of it this way as well. The town, part of the Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative, we joined forces with, depending on the utility, 30 to 40 different towns. And you know what I mean? And bulk purchase all these utilities. So we are pretty successful in keeping our costs low. So that's what we do.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. I think that answers my questions, and I'm glad that we have it locked in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good question, Tom. Good answer, Bruce.
Thank you.
Other questions for Bruce? If not, I want to say thank you, Bruce, particularly if this is your last day heading into vacation. And I also want to compliment you again on all the number of budgets that you have to manage and control. And and you do it well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce.
Bruce.
You're welcome.
So Mr. Quimby, you are up. Again, I'll ask, I did have a chance to walk through, and again, mostly questions of information. If you like, we can go through the budget. If you want, I can go through my questions and then have everybody have at it, or we can go one by one for each person. If someone wants to start off, other than me, it's fine with me. So,
Whoever you guys want, it's fine with me.
Yeah, through the chair.
yes, Tom.
One request, Jim, can we
Yeah.
reference the page numbers that we're working off of before we start all these discussions? Because as you know, we have many documents in front of us, and I want to make sure I continue to look at the correct ones.
Sure, you're so just to ground all of us, Tom. So what I'm looking at right now is page 16 of 75, which is Department 155, Information Technology. Is that
Okay.
what you're referring to? The
Yeah.
16? Okay, all right, then do that. Anybody want to start before me? If not, I'll start, and please chime in and get a chance. Before we go to anything else, we'll certainly open it up. So Ryan, thank you. And just had a couple of questions again. The temporary position, the 9,000, which later I see is described as summer help. Is that new? Is that a new thing that you're doing? I remember that when you were doing some of the transition of technology, you had some summer help, if I recall, that you brought in. But this doesn't seem to have been in a budget in a prior year. So is this something new that you're doing?
It was in the FY20 budget.
The 6210.
In FY20, it was under temporary position for 7,200 bucks.
Okay, and then it wasn't budgeted in FY21. Is that because you didn't need it?
No, it was removed as going through the budget process, removed due to COVID cuts.
Okay, so you just didn't do what you, or you did, but you may do without the summer help. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we actually, with the help of the schools, offset a lot of that labor with overtime with my employees, and got them right on the edge of burnout. So,
all right. So you had your people work extra hours to do it in lieu of the summer help.
yeah, yep, yeah, and we had a former employee that was between jobs that came and volunteered his time to work for us and didn't have to pay him. So we abused him pretty good as well.
Well,
But he now lives in California, so unfortunately we can't take advantage of that anymore.
and is it something that's okay, what is it that you're doing? You're refurbishing stuff for that in between school years or something?
Yeah, preparing. Was incredibly surprising to me how long it actually takes to unbox new Chromebooks. So we have to take them out of the box, set them up, and enroll them in our management system and add them to our inventory system. When we did our first big round, when we went one-to-one in FY20, it took like almost a month just to do that. And then you have to assign them by grade level and get them ready for the students that way. And then we also have a lot of other summer projects that we're going to have to take care of.
I just realized I should back up and just say thank you to you and your people, the people in your department. Thinking about what the challenges that the IT went through with COVID is pretty incredible. I'm glad I wasn't working for IT at the time. And I have to say, it seems like your group came through, you and supported the town and supported the schools, and I compliment you very much and thank you for what you were able to accomplish.
Having, being in the position that we were in, having our one-to-one established when we did, and then being hit by COVID, we were in such a good position. I would venture a guess that there are at least 2 to 3 dozen other districts now that have policies that look exactly like ours, but just have the names changed. They all had to try and get theirs going so fast, and we had ours just completed, and I shared our link out almost every day just for other people to grab that information from. So
again, small question, but overtime 5130, same page times 16. It's 100% increase. And is it, if you're getting this summer help back, are you going to need as much of that, or?
yeah, that's also a restoration to FY20 levels. So FY20 was $5,000. FY21, I dropped it to 2,500 to meet the COVID markers, and now I'm just trying to get that back up to where it was. We use that for obviously any after hours outages, but also, and more importantly, is after hours maintenance, rebooting servers, blowing out switch cabinets, that type of thing.
That's all I have for page 16. Anyone have any other questions for Ann on page 16? So page 17 is really the non-salary expenses. Again, just making sure I understand, Ryan. I'm looking at 5248 repairs computer equipment is going up $15,000. Are you thinking, is this a reflection of what you've been spending, or
it's a reflection of what we've been spending. It's also a restoration back to FY20 levels. FY20 it was at $60,000. FY21 we dropped it to $50,000. This is to get us back up to that level. As part of a kind of a reference, in 2005, before I took over as director, that line item was $97,000.
So it makes me think, just as a footnote to all of us, and I know in the past sometimes we've had explanations on the side in terms of any relatively large percentage changes, and I can imagine that I probably wouldn't be asking a number of these questions because the answers are pretty straightforward. I just don't know what they are. So maybe next year we can make it more efficient for you if we can prevail on Mary to have her ask you guys to put some notes in there.
Yeah, and I did submit a supplemental sheet with notes for every single line item, especially like line 5310.
Yeah,
that's all of our maintenance contracts.
Yeah.
So really like 43 sub line items under that for all of our different annual maintenance contracts that we pay.
all right. So maybe if whoever's involved with the process next year, that information would make it more streamlined for you in terms of talking through some of these things. So the radio, which is down 10,000. Normally I wouldn't complain at all, but I'm just, again, questioning, is something changed? Are those two-way radios, or those
Yep.
something you're not using anymore? Or?
So in FY21 we had a 15,000 budgeted. That was to maintain our town-wide two-way radios. That's police, fire, public works, schools. Police and fire are now on the Westcom system, so we are no longer responsible for maintaining those.
All right, good. And then I think final question on, there's a 5308 technical consultants. It's up 100% or $5,000. Is that you anticipating, are these actually consultants or?
Yep, consultants, staff augmentation when we're overloaded and need a task done in a timely fashion. That's what we use that account for. And that increase again is a restoration back to FY20 levels.
And then again, internet, which is 5346, and Tom, I'm sorry, I'm on page 17. A 2/3 increase, is that the same answer? Or is that something that's going up as a result of Comcast?
So right now we're on a 2 gig internet plan. That brings us up to, I think it's a 5 gig. I think I just threw away the signed contract, but that's what it is. It's an increase in services.
Okay. Steve, did you have a comment you wanted to make? Or you're just, okay.
Flies.
All right, so 5 gigs, and I assume that will help the response time throughout the town and the schools?
Yeah, with remote learning. So now with a lot of the students coming back, they're still remote students. So you'll have every kid in the classroom on a Zoom meeting, and then every remote kid also trying to connect in, and just getting that, keeping that speed up.
So we have a 6.13% increase over the FY21 budget for non-salary, and 5.72 for the grand total. The way I understand your comments, if we were to compare this FY22 request to the FY20 budget, it's possible that that number would be less.
Yeah, so compared to the FY20 budget, it's actually negative 1.9. That's not, let me change this real quick. This has to be G here. Yes, it's less, yes. It's not as big of an increase.
All right. I guess I can follow that. That is all the question. Oh, there's one item on page 18, Ryan, again, it's just questioning. There's one individual in the full-time salaries that has a less than full-time salary amount. Is that because of the amount of time that person will be on board for FY22?
That position is full-time, 30 hours split with the rec department. So it's not a full 37 and a half, it's just 30.
All right, the number still looks pretty low even for 30 hours, but we can check on that.
You're talking about Dave Ericsberg?
Yes.
Yep, the balance of that will be in the rec department budget.
Okay, all right. I didn't understand what you were saying. Thank you.
No problem.
Those are all my questions for IT. Others, open it up. Anyone want to ask Ryan any questions? Okay, I don't hear any questions, Ryan. Sounds like you're good to go. Thank you very much.
You got it.
Tom.
Muted, Tom. You're muted.
You're on mute, Tom. You're on mute.
Thank you. I've been working with Ryan on capital and as a counselor on the budget for many years. And he is one of the department heads that I like to compliment on the work that he does to keep the budget streamlined as he does. And I just wanted to say that on camera because Ryan does an exceptional job in under extreme circumstances at times like that have occurred with COVID. And I'd just like to commend him.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom. And you have other people nodding their heads. So. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan.
Take care.
So it's 2:30, and we've gotten through the capital projects, the technology budget, and DPW budget. Our next order of business on our agenda was the committee's budget format recommendations. But before we go there, I just thought I'd raise the question of the COVID funding, the COVID grants. And Mary, you had a brief discussion with the town council as part of your presentation of the final budget. And I just want to get a better sense as to where and how we get a few answers to it, and maybe it's too early, but I'm looking back at the information that Chris had sent to me, and I think and I hope I sent to the rest of the members, and I had sent a kind of a one-page summary of the numbers for East Long Meadow. And Mary, was that 4.7 million was that what you were referring to in your discussion with the town council? I have an amount from that report that Chris showed me the link to, 4,737,769 and coronavirus local stability fund. You're on mute, Mary. You're on mute, Mary. You're still on mute.
We're gonna figure out the Zoom thing pretty soon.
When you do, will you let me know?
The 4.7 is the amount from the chart that was distributed by the Mass Municipal Organization.
Yeah.
The bulk of that is the town share of the Hampden County funding. Since the county government has been disbanded, they cut up the amount that was designated in the act for county funding by population by the towns that are in that former county. So, but 4.7 is the number, give or take, maybe 4.76 or something. We haven't received any of it yet, and we haven't received any instructions yet, or restrictions or advice. I mean, I have a number of articles that suggest the broad uses. In fact, Ralph at council the other night mentioned infrastructure. That's certainly one of the 4 major uses that they talk about, but there was also, in the beginning at least, a general caveat that these funds had to have a nexus to COVID. So I don't know how specific that nexus has to be demonstrated, and that's what we're all waiting for the guidance about. But I don't have the guidance yet. And the first distribution, our money in East Long Meadow, since we're a town with less than 50,000 population, is coming through the Commonwealth. Other larger municipalities are getting it directly without that intermediate step. So it's due by May 10th, and hopefully it'll be accompanied by a plethora of guidelines.
So for the purposes of our deliberations, it sounds like maybe we'll get information just as we're voting on the budget recommendations. I'm not sure we'll be in a position to really absorb that information in order to refresh it and make recommendations to the town council based on that. But it seems like it potentially has such a big impact, I mean, to the good, but
Yeah.
I assume, and I'm just talking, so for my purposes, if you have something to say, just jump right in. I'm wondering whether we keep proceeding with what we plan to do, and when that comes out and we have an idea and we can absorb it, and Mary can absorb it, excuse me, Mary and Steve and the town, whatever impact that has, you still may not know in time for the town council have to vote a budget, at least according to the charter. So it almost sounds like it's something that's going to be a follow-up once the budget is approved. Am I thinking, is that make sense? Or
It makes sense to me, Jim, and I think based on the timing as we know it, that's the best case scenario that you just articulated. You know, there's only 1 week in between. Monday's the 3rd of May. So if we get some advance information, I'll certainly share it with you as soon as I have it.
Yeah.
But to date, everything has been very much a generic description without the particulars. So
maybe in the same way that sometimes we can file an amended tax return, once we've got that figured out, then there may be a budget adjustment or a town budget adjustment that the town council may wish to vote on, particularly if it has beneficial impact on the town
Right.
and particularly the tax rate. So I guess is there a window then between when the town council votes the budget by 6/1, and the town has to submit its recap sheet and have its authorized budget as part of that recap sheet, right?
Yeah, well, that's not until the fall, November typically, right, Chris, or Steve? You can
Yeah,
answer.
go right in, Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say, plus the numbers from the state, from the legislature,
They're gonna change.
probably won't come, if we're lucky this year, they might come in June. I noticed that the House voted their budget yesterday, close to midnight. But, so their recommendations, like on the cherry sheet, are higher. However, it's got to go to the Senate, it's got to go to the conference committee. So those numbers will change too. So all we can work with is what we've got at this point in time, be it COVID relief or be it the state budget.
Right,
All right, so maybe what happens is this gets absorbed, and prior to having to submit a tax recap sheet, if there is an amendment or a change to the budget, that would be to the town's benefit and the town council to vote. That's the window we have, is to have it done then before we submit the tax recap. Yes, Chris,
That's kind of what we did last year. It was a provisional budget. I don't know if we should put that label on it for this year because of all the pending information. But certainly the budget was adjusted after the June 1st date to accommodate what was learned after that time. And generally the tax rate doesn't go in until November. And so I would say that the council will have time as far as when they deliberate on their appropriations.
right. My only concern with that word provisional is that I think it may cause some people, whether residents or council members, to question whether or not it's in fact an authorized budget, and we need to operate with the budget as approved starting July 1. So, it is subject to change, certainly. I fully expect that the cherry sheet numbers will go up, but the budget that I presented the other night contained the numbers from January from the governor without any estimates of increase because they're not law yet.
Yes.
And these various receipts of the ARPA money and other COVID-related grants may shuffle in the door over the next few months to help us with sidewalks or with the, I forget the name of the project that Ralph mentioned at the council the other night, but it was a $650,000 project that was on the capital list for bonding. So if we could get those things accomplished, we can certainly amend the budget by the time the tax rate is set, and it will bode well. But I don't want to call it provisional. I'm afraid of that word.
Well, do you want us to say that it's subject to change?
Yes, that would be much better.
Okay.
to the better. Steve, you wanted to say something?
The other thing to remember, what we're voting on for June 1st is the expenditure side of the budget. The revenue side, as Chris said, isn't done until the tax rate, which is in December. So using the ARPA money as an example, it would come in and we could adjust the one-time revenue by that amount. The expenditure would stay the same, but it'd offset it, in essence, zeroing it out, and then it would flow down at the end of the year. But we'd be able to adjust the revenue side of it before December, so we'd have more time frame to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm a little confused by that. So we authorize my understanding, the town council appropriates expenditures
Yes.
based on the estimate of revenues. So if the estimate of revenues goes up, let's say, after the budget is voted, the changes we would make would be in reducing or somehow changing the expenses that we appropriated, correct?
Well, when you adjust in that scenario, you voted the to Mary's point, it's not a provisional budget, it's the actual budget for expenditures.
Right.
Now the local receipts through the one-time revenue, we'll say, increase more than what we estimated. Well, that'll flow down to the tax rate, which will lower the tax rate because you'll have to raise less in taxes.
Well, yes, and I don't disagree with that at all. That's the normal
Right.
routine of things. And usually the changes are not meaningful or significant enough to be an issue. I think where we're talking about potential impact of $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, depending on what it's useful for, that would be significant enough where we would probably have expense line items or capital projects where the expenditures might be, would want to be revisited, is what I'm thinking. Yes, Chris.
Well, for instance, this year, we only put $50,000 into stabilization, $50,000 into OPED. This might be a golden opportunity to increase that. In fact, today's reminder showed that Longmeadow is putting $1 million into, I think it's their stabilization fund. So, maybe that's how other communities are approaching this. I don't know. But there might be other pockets where the money can go.
Tom, you had a comment?
Yeah, I did, and it's probably for Mary. Have you received any direction from the state or heard any rumblings, as we did last year, with regards to extending the deadlines for submitting budgets? Last year, we were given the option to extend the approval of the budget and work off of 1/12. Not that I want to do that again.
It's not authorized this year, Tom.
It's not. Thank you.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to clear my head a little bit about how this would work and when we would potentially get information and how that would work with the schedule that we're dealing with. Any other comments on that topic? I think it's helped me a little bit get a little clearer. Yes, Chris.
I'm sorry, I keep talking.
Well, you're very experienced in this end of it, so I appreciate your input. Go ahead.
I think we'll go on as we've planned. That's the best thing that we can do.
Right.
Work with what we have.
Yep.
And as Mary said, have something in place for June 1st and they can operate come July 1st with the new fiscal year. They need to have a budget in place for that point in time. And anything after that comes to light or within a time frame for them to do something, they can bring changes to the town council for further appropriation, further reductions, or whatever, as long as it's done before the tax rate is set. That's my opinion. That's the way it's up.
I think that's a good summary of the way I read the consensus of the discussion here. So thank you. Yep. Is anyone of a different thought than what Chris described? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Well, gonna have late news. It's good that it's good news. The next item on our agenda was to discuss the presentation format for our committee. And Mary was kind enough to share the bar chart and through Steve, share with me the spreadsheet, the summary spreadsheets and the town department numbers in a spreadsheet that I can play with a little bit. I guess the general question is, I think I shared out to you a copy of the FY21 presentation report that we use to walk through our recommendations with the town council. Does that generally seem to be acceptable to use again this year, or do we want to make any big changes to it? Yes, Tom.
Yeah, I think what we did last year was very well done and a good format to use going forward. It was well received during and afterwards.
All right.
So I don't see any necessary big changes to it.
Other comments? Yes, Kathy.
I was going to suggest that based on the very articulate summary that Chris just gave about, what are next steps after the council votes in the official budget, to better explain to both the council and to the public, you add a slide that summarizes those bullet points about, things that will be adjusted based on income from at the federal level, and how it may very well improve the tax rate before the tax rate is actually set.
Good suggestion. I like that. Other comments? There was one question that was raised when we originally looked at the summary reports that Mary had provided to us in the budget package, and that is the issue of how we present the revenue. The current report shows what we can, the whole max levy. So we show the amount that we can raise to the max. And then we show our projected expenses, and then we show a surplus or a deficit, depending on what it is, which the last few years has been a surplus, meaning the format showed that we weren't needing to spend as much as we could potentially raise through taxation. Chris had raised the question, is that the way we want to present it, or do we want to show it where we chop down to the amount that's needed to balance the recommended expenses? I know my preference at the time was I like the maximum levy because it kind of starts you from the top and says, here's what we could charge, and you run everything in, and then you see, how much or how little you have to play with. But perhaps there's also a good spot if we added one that actually balanced the surplus to zero based on the recommended expenses. That would then force the top revenue line to show less of a tax levy, et cetera. And maybe that would be an informative also way to show it. The risk is confusion, I suppose. Any big druthers?
I think if you did that,
Go ahead.
I think if you did that, if you start with the maximum levy, if the average person taxpayer looks at it on the screen, it has to be clearly labeled so that they will know, because it has to show somewhere. For instance, on the F-21 approved budget, instead of showing the maximum levy, you'd have to make room also for the actual levy.
Yeah, I agree. Maximum potential levy, something along those lines
Yeah.
would make sense. Yes, Chris. All right. Then I think what I'll do is begin kind of reformatting the report to add our columns, where we show our recommendations, so that when we do get to our vote, all we have to do is add those things, add the actual results in.
Great.
So that we don't have to recreate the report once we reach that point, because there won't be that much time to
I have one more
prepare
thing.
it. Sorry, go ahead. First of all, we have a small enough group in attendance right here. I don't think we'll get too confused. If you have something to say, go right ahead and say it. If it starts to get confusing, I'll ask you to slow down. But go ahead.
I watched the council meeting the other night, and Mary said that this 18-page document, the preliminary, the sources and so forth, she had 4 pages that were changed. 1, 3, 9, and 12.
Something like that. I think it was 12 and 14. I think I
Okay.
misspoke at the council meeting.
If we could get those somehow and file them, change our packet.
Actually, Mary asked Steve, and he was kind enough to send me a copy of that. And so either Steve can directly share it with you, or I can send my copy out to you. Either way, yes, that's already there and it's available.
And Chris, that was only because the formula repeats itself on those pages that I referenced. And when we
Right.
subtracted the $200,000 for the core network failure from
Yeah.
our capital, it reduced that amount by 200,000.
Right.
Therefore, the math changed on page 1, page 3,
Whatever.
etc. That was the only change. But
There's always a ripple effect, Mary.
Yeah, right. Right,
So is that something Steve could send out or?
Sure.
All
Yeah, I
right,
can set up.
sure.
That'd be great.
the
I apologize.
final version, Steve, that we talked about.
Yeah, I got it.
All right, very good. That was all I was looking to cover regarding that topic, unless anybody has something else about that. Okay. So next week is the schools, and if some of you have already supplied me some questions, and what I'd like to do is put those together and get something off by end of day tomorrow, if possible. Worst case Monday, just to give them a list of anything that they could prepare for beforehand if necessary, so that they can have that, and we can be that much more efficient on Thursday. So if you have any other questions, and I'll certainly share the questions amalgamated to all of you before I send it off. But just a reminder, if you have any other questions on the school budget or information you want us to get beyond what you've sent me so far, please get it to me today or tomorrow if you can. And let's see, how are we doing on our, I think that's pretty much what we're looking to cover for today. I just want to remind you again, next Thursday, we'll be meeting. And any other items we should cover today before we adjourn? All right, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right,
Second.
Chris. Second, Tom. Yeah. Any other discussion? All right, hearing none. Chris,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Jim, yes. All right. So moved and so voted. We're all adjourned. Thank you all for attending and thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Jim,
Yes.
if you want to just give me a call, I can answer that question for you.
Okay, sure.
It's very simple, but
It might be tomorrow. I've got a meeting.
That's fine.
to jump to, but great. Thank
just
you. I
wanted
appreciate
to
that.
let you know. Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.